Hello class, and welcome to today's lecture on documentation and shift communication in the social service worker program. In today's lecture, we'll be focusing on three main themes that are essential in the field of social service work. These themes are the importance of proper documentation and its impact on client care, as well as the role of shift communication in maintaining continuity of care, and then finally some ethical considerations surrounding documentation and shift communication in social service work. Now, as social service workers, you have a general responsibility to provide high quality care to your clients. And this responsibility extends beyond just the time we spend with clients, but also includes the documentation of our interactions and the communication of relevant information to our colleagues during shift changes. And in order to provide the best possible care, it is essential that we understand the importance of proper shift documentation and shift communication. Over the course of this lecture, we will explore each of these themes in depth, drawing upon research literature and practical examples from the field. By the end of the lecture, you will have a deeper understanding of how documentation and shift communication contribute to the overall quality of care provided in the field of social service work. So let's dive in and explore. So we're going to start off with a story, and then we'll dive into the documentation impact on client care, the shift communication, and some ethical considerations. But first, the story. Now, a little bit of background on this, just to be mindful that proper documentation is a critical aspect of social service work. It ensures that all relevant information is recorded and communicated effectively. Now, inaccurate and incomplete or missing documentation can have serious consequences for clients, for staff, and organizations. And so I want to reiterate the importance of proper documentation in the social service setting. And we're going to just look at an example from Canada. Now, in 2019, an investigation was launched into the death of a 31-year-old man who was a patient at a mental health facility in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Now, according to the investigation report, there were significant gaps in the patient's medical records and other documentation related to his care. And these gaps contributed to a failure in communication between staff members and led to the patient's death. Now, the investigation found that staff members were not properly trained in documenting patient care, which led to incomplete and inaccurate information being recorded. And this lack of documentation led to a breakdown in communication between staff members, resulting in inadequate care for the patient. And this tragic example highlights the critical role that proper documentation plays in the social service setting. Inadequate documentation can lead to miscommunication and inadequate care, which can have serious consequences for clients. And in this case, it was the death of the client himself. So, it's essential for social service workers to ensure that they are documenting all relevant information accurately and thoroughly. And this includes recording client information, any interventions given, and the outcomes of those interventions. And it's also important to document any interactions with other staff members and external service providers. In other words, documentation is central to the care of people and to the mission that comes in as part of social service work and community service work. Documentation is essential in the social service setting, as it plays a crucial role in providing quality care. In social services, documentation is used to record and communicate information about clients, about their needs and the services provided to them. It provides a sense of legitimacy and a framework of legitimacy. This documentation can also be used for case management, for service planning, for program evaluation, as well as for research to confirm that what we're doing is effective and appropriate, as well as it's important for legal purposes. So what I want to do now is discuss the importance of documentation in the social service sector and how it impacts client care. And we'll also discuss the types of documentation that should be included and provide some references from peer-reviewed research literature to highlight the lessons learned from this research. Now, the importance of documentation in the social service setting is that documentation is essential for ensuring that clients receive quality care and services. And so accurate and complete documentation provides a clear understanding of the client's needs and helps to identify appropriate interventions. Now, this documentation also ensures that services are delivered consistently and that clients receive the same level of care from all service providers. This documentation also plays an important role in communication among the service providers. So proper documentation ensures that all service providers have access to the same information, enabling them to provide consistent services to the clients. And this is particularly important in cases where clients receive services from multiple service providers or when a client is transferred to another service provider. Now, the types of documentation in the social service setting really kind of depend upon, and they vary somewhat depending upon the type of service being provided. However, there are some common types of documentation, and these would start off with intake forms. And these forms provide basic information about the client and their needs. And they're used to identify the client's needs and determine the appropriate services to be provided. Oftentimes, there's also assessment forms, and these forms provide detailed information about the client's needs, their strengths, and their limitations, and they are often used to develop a service plan that is tailored to the client's specific needs. There will also be some progress notes, and these notes provide information about the services provided to the client's response to the services, and any changes to the service plan. And they are used to monitor the client's progress and to make changes to the service plan as needed. There's also incident reports, and these reports document any incidents that occur during service delivery, such as accidents, injuries, or behavioral incidents. And they are used to identify potential risks to the client and to improve service delivery. And there are some lessons that we can learn from the literature that shows that proper documentation is critical to providing quality care. Now, what studies have found is that accurate and complete documentation improves communication among service providers. It ensures that clients receive consistent services and supports program evaluation as well as research. However, research also shows that documentation can be time-consuming and that service providers may not always prioritize it. Now, one study found that service providers perceived documentation as an administrative burden and were more likely to prioritize service delivery over documentation. However, that same study also found that service providers who received training in the importance of documentation were more likely to prioritize it and provide quality documentation. And we should always keep in mind that documentation is not something that is an add-on to service provision. It is part of good service provision. Another study found that poor documentation could lead to negative outcomes for clients, including delayed or inadequate services and legal problems. And the study highlighted the importance of proper documentation in ensuring that clients receive appropriate services and in protecting service providers from legal liabilities. It's important to have documentation, in essence, to prove that you are providing a proper standard of care. And that is a huge protection against legal liabilities. Documentation is essential in providing quality client care in the social service setting. So without that proper documentation, there is no evidence for proper care. And so it's something that needs to be provided. And on top of that, it helps you to improve your programs because it supports program evaluation and research and protects service providers. So it is part of the service, and it is a protection for you as the service provider. Now, while documentation can be time-consuming, yes, I totally agree with that, it is still critical to prioritize it to ensure quality care. Service providers should receive training, and that's why we're doing this, so that you understand the importance of documentation and prioritizing completing accurate and consistent information in the documentation. Now, let's look again at the kinds of documents that you will often come across in organizations, even though it's going to vary from organization to organization and the type of service being provided and the agency. But normally, one thing that you will have will be incident reports, as I've mentioned. And these are reports that document any incidents that occurred while providing services to clients. Incidents can include accidents or injuries or any other unexpected event that happens during service delivery. Incident reports provide a way to document what happened, who was involved, and any actions that were taken to address the situation. Then there's assessments, and assessments are an important part of client care as they provide a baseline for understanding a client's needs and strengths. There are many different types of assessments, including mental health assessments, substance abuse assessments, and functional assessments. And these assessments provide a starting point for developing a care plan and can help to identify any areas where additional services or interventions may be needed. There's also consent forms, and consent forms are important documents that outline the client's right to privacy and their rights to make decisions about their own care. And these forms may include information about what information can be shared, who can access the information, and how the information can be used. And then, of course, treatment plans. And treatment plans are developed in collaboration with the client and outline the goals and objectives for the treatment. And treatment plans may include information about the client's diagnosis, the types of services that will be provided, and the expected outcomes of the treatment. And proper documentation, remember, is key to ensuring client care, whether it be an incident report or an assessment or a consent form or a treatment plan. We're going to pause there and let you take a bit of a break. And when we come back, we will explore a little bit about shift communication as well as some ethical considerations around documentation. You take care, and I'll see you in a little while. Goodbye.